Rain poured over the sleek glass buildings of Manhattan, droplets racing down the windows of Morgan and Hayes' law firm like tears. Olivia Bennett, a corporate attorney known for her sharp mind and uncompromising dedication, stood frozen by the window of her corner office, staring at the email that had just appeared on her screen. The 14-hour workday had drained her, but it wasn't her body that felt shattered. It was her future. The partnership she'd sacrificed everything for over the past 6 years had just been offered to someone else, someone with fewer billable hours but better connections. 6 years of missed birthdays, cancelled vacations, and microwave dinners, all evaporated with a single paragraph of corporate pleasantries and hollow promises of next time. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. She closed her laptop, the motion deliberate and final. Her reflection in the rain-streaked window looked unfamiliar. Dark circles under once bright eyes, her chestnut hair pulled back so severely it seemed to be fighting against her pale skin. When had she become this person? This hollow, exhausted shadow who had nothing to show for her sacrifice except a spectacular view of a city she barely had time to experience. Her phone buzzed, lighting up with her sister Rachel's name. Olivia answered, forcing brightness into her voice. "Hey, what's up?" "Liv, I know you're busy, but I need a huge favor," Rachel said, her voice uncharacteristically tense. "Maya's school. It called. She has a fever and I'm stuck in Boston for this conference. Mum's in Florida. Could you possibly pick her up and watch her until tomorrow? I know it's a lot to ask, but—" "Of course," Olivia cut in, surprising herself with how quickly she agreed. Maybe the partnership rejection had freed something in her. Maybe she just needed to feel useful to someone who actually appreciated her. "Text me the address. I'll head there now." As she gathered her things, Olivia realized this would be the first time she'd be alone with her 5-year-old niece overnight. She had always been the aunt who sent expensive gifts to make up for missed birthday parties, who video-called from conference rooms during holiday gatherings. The thought of being responsible for a child for a full 24 hours sent a wave of panic through her, but also something else. A strange sense of liberation from the suffocating routine of her life. The school was in an upscale neighborhood. In Brooklyn, its red brick facade warm despite the dismal weather. Inside, the halls smelled of crayons and disinfectant. Maya sat alone in the nurse's office, her small frame hunched on a plastic chair, dark curls falling over her flushed face. "Aunt Livy." She looked up, eyes brightening despite her obvious discomfort. "You came." "Of course I came, sweetie." Olivia knelt beside her, feeling Maya's forehead with the back of her hand. She was burning up. "Let's get you home and comfortable." "Okay?" As they walked to the car, Maya's small hand in hers, Olivia felt a strange tightening in her chest, a protective instinct she hadn't known existed within her. She helped Maya into the back seat, making sure the seatbelt was secure, and caught herself thinking about what medicine she had at home, whether her sheets were clean enough for a sick child, if she had any food beyond protein bars and coffee. "Are we going to your apartment in the sky?" Maya asked, her voice small but curious. Olivia smiled, meeting Maya's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Yes, we are. You can see all of Manhattan from my windows." "Cool," Maya murmured, then closed her eyes, fatigue overtaking her excitement. Olivia's apartment was on the 38th floor of a luxury building in Tribeca, a space she had chosen for its impressive address and proximity to the office, rather than any sense of home. As she unlocked the door, she suddenly saw it through Maya's eyes. Sleek, minimalist furniture that had never been sat on for movie nights. A kitchen with high-end appliances that had never produced a batch of cookies. Walls devoid of photos or memories. Maya didn't seem to notice the sterility. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, her small hand pressed against the glass, watching the rain create patterns on the cityscape below. "It's like we're in the clouds," she whispered. "Let's get you settled," Olivia said, leading Maya to the guest bedroom. She helped her change into a t-shirt that hung to her knees, the smallest thing Olivia owned, and tucked her into the pristine white sheets. After giving her some children's Tylenol she'd hastily purchased at the pharmacy downstairs, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, feeling awkward and unsure. "Would you like me to read you a story?" she asked, realizing too late that she didn't own any children's books. Maya shook her head, eyes already heavy. "Just stay until I fall asleep, please." Olivia nodded, surprised by the request. She gently brushed Maya's damp curls from her forehead, and the simple touch sent an unexpected wave of tenderness through her. Here was this small, vulnerable person, trusting her completely. When was the last time anyone had needed her for something other than a legal brief or a conference call? "Aunt Livy," Maya murmured, already half asleep. "Do you know my daddy?" The question struck Olivia like a physical blow. She knew the story, her sister's brief relationship with a man who disappeared before knowing Rachel was pregnant, leaving her to raise Maya alone. "No, sweetie, I don't," she answered softly. "Mommy says he lives in the city. Maybe we'll see him tomorrow." Maya's voice trailed off as she drifted to sleep, unaware of the impact of her innocent words. Olivia sat there long after Maya's breathing had deepened into sleep, her mind spinning with memories she'd locked away 6 years ago. A chance encounter at a charity gala, crystal champagne flutes catching the light, a deep laugh that made her feel like the only woman in the room. One night of connection that had felt like more, until she woke alone with nothing but a handwritten note saying he had an early flight. No number, no last name, just Alexander signed at the bottom. She'd buried the humiliation beneath mountains of legal briefs, refusing to think about that night, about her own naivety. She was Olivia Bennett, corporate attorney on track to become the youngest partner at Morgan and Hayes. She didn't have time for relationships, let alone dwelling on one-night stands from half a decade ago. But now, watching Maya sleep, Olivia couldn't help but notice the shape of her nose, the curve of her mouth that looked nothing like Rachel's, but stirred a distant memory. Maya would be about the right age. No, the thought was absurd. New York was home to millions. The chances that her sister's anonymous ex was the same man Olivia had spent one night with were astronomically small. She was letting her imagination run wild, a sign of how badly she needed sleep. Olivia quietly left the room, leaving the door cracked open so she could hear if Maya called for her. In the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of red wine and stood at the windows, watching lightning illuminate the city skyline. Tomorrow, she would call the law firm and negotiate a generous severance package. Maybe it was time for a change. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt the faintest stirring of something that felt like hope. The next morning, Maya's fever had broken, but Rachel called to say her flight was delayed due to the storm. "Would you mind taking her with you to the office for a few hours?" Rachel asked. "I promise I'll be there by noon." Olivia looked at Maya, who was currently drawing elaborate patterns on a legal pad with Olivia's expensive fountain pen. "Actually, I think I'll take the day off. We'll go get pancakes and maybe visit the Museum of Natural History. The dinosaurs, right, Maya?" Maya's face lit up, and Rachel's surprise was audible through the phone. "Who are you, and what have you done with my workaholic sister?" "Very funny. Text me when you land." Olivia hung up, already mentally planning their day. "Okay, Munchkin, let's get you dressed." After breakfast at a cozy diner where Maya declared the chocolate chip pancakes the best in the universe, they headed toward the museum. As they waited at a crosswalk on Fifth Avenue, Maya suddenly froze, her small hand tightening around Olivia's. "What is it?" Olivia asked, concerned by the change in her demeanor. Maya pointed at a sleek skyscraper across the street, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun. "That's where he works." "Who works there, sweetie?" "The man in Mommy's picture. she said. That's where my daddy works, at the very top. Olivia stared at the building, her heart rate accelerating. Hayes International Group, one of the largest private equity firms in the country, led by CEO Alexander Hayes, notorious for his business acumen and intensely private personal life. A man whose photo she had deliberately avoided looking at during a case involving one of his subsidiaries last year because something about his name had stirred uncomfortable memories. Maya, how do you know that's where he works? Olivia asked carefully. Maya shrugged. Mommy has an old picture. She pointed at the building once when we were walking. She said, my daddy is very important and busy. The light changed, and they crossed the street, Olivia moving on autopilot while her mind raced. It couldn't be. It was impossible. But as they passed the gleaming entrance to Hayes International, she found herself slowing, staring at the understated logo etched into the glass doors. Alexander Hayes. The Alexander she had met at the charity gala had never mentioned his last name, had been deliberately vague about his work. Investments, he'd said, with a smile that suggested the conversation. Should move elsewhere. Can we go see him? Maya asked, tugging at Olivia's hand. Not today, sweetie, Olivia managed, gently pulling Maya along. He's probably very busy. Let's go see those dinosaurs instead. But as they continued down the street, Olivia couldn't shake the growing suspicion taking root in her mind. She needed to know. After 6 years of burying that night in her memory, she suddenly needed to see his face, to confirm what now seemed like a horrifying possibility. The Museum of Natural History should have been a welcome distraction, with its towering dinosaur skeletons and cosmic displays that usually filled Olivia with childlike wonder. But today, she moved through the exhibits on autopilot, her mind replaying fragments of that night 6 years ago, while Maya darted excitedly from one display to another. Alexander, no last name given, dark hair with a distinguished touch of silver. At the temples, despite his relatively young age, eyes that seemed to shift between blue and grey, depending on the light. A commanding presence that had drawn her attention from across the room at the charity gala for children's literacy, an event her firm had insisted she attend to network with potential clients. He was looking at you, her colleague had whispered, nodding toward a tall figure by the bar. That's not just any guy, Liv. That's... But before she could finish, Olivia had been pulled away by a senior partner to meet a judge. Later, he had approached her himself, 2 champagne flutes in hand. The conversation had flowed effortlessly, skimming across literature, travel and art, without touching on their professional lives. When he'd invited her for a nightcap at his hotel bar, she'd accepted without hesitation, something so out of character that she'd barely recognized herself. One drink had led to his suite, to a night that had felt like finding a missing piece of herself, and then morning came, an empty bed, a handwritten note apologizing for the early departure, an unavoidable flight, just his first name scrawled at the bottom. Aunt Livy, look, this one could eat a whole car. Maya's voice pulled her back to the present. The little girl was pointing up at a massive T-Rex, her eyes wide with delight. That's pretty impressive, Olivia managed, forcing a smile. She knelt beside Maya, suddenly struck by the child's profile, the determined set of her jaw, the slight furrow of concentration between her brows. Features that belonged neither to Rachel nor to Maya's grandfather. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Flight landed. At baggage claim. We'll grab a taxi and meet you guys for lunch. Where are you? Olivia suggested a restaurant near the museum, her fingers hovering over the keyboard after sending the address. She almost typed, "We need to talk about Maya's father." But she deleted the words. She needed proof first, needed to be certain before potentially blowing up her sister's life and her own. "Your mum's on her way," she told Maya, tucking her phone away. "How about we see the Butterfly Conservatory before lunch?" As they wandered through the humid garden filled with fluttering, jewel-toned wings, Olivia made a decision. She would find out for certain if Alexander Hayes was the same man from that night, if he was Maya's father. Her niece deserved to know her heritage, and Rachel deserved the truth, no matter how complicated or painful it might be. At lunch, Olivia watched her sister carefully. Rachel looked tired but happy to see her daughter, listening intently as Maya described the dinosaurs and butterflies in vivid detail. 6 years as a single mother had added premature lines around Rachel's eyes, but she'd never complained, never spoken bitterly about the man who'd left her to face parenthood alone. "Thanks for watching her," Rachel said, as Maya went to examine the dessert display. "I know it was last minute. You're probably dying to get back to your cases." Olivia shook her head. "Actually, I didn't get the partnership." "What?" Rachel's fork clattered against her plate. "But you've killed yourself for that firm. How could they—" "It's fine," Olivia interrupted, surprised to find she meant it. "I'm thinking it might be time for a change anyway." Rachel studied her with newfound curiosity. "Who are you, and what have you done with my sister? Seriously, one day with Maya and suddenly you're zen about losing a partnership you've been obsessing over for years?" Olivia smiled ruefully. "Maybe I needed perspective." She hesitated, then added, "Rach, Maya mentioned something about her father yesterday. She said he works in that big glass building on 5th, Hayes International." Rachel's expression froze, then carefully rearranged itself into neutrality. "She has an active imagination." "Do you know who he is?" Olivia pressed gently. Rachel sighed, glancing toward the dessert counter, where Maya was still deliberating between chocolate cake and ice cream. "Not really. We met at a gallery opening. He said he was in town briefly for business. By the time I discovered I was pregnant, he was long gone. No way to contact him." "But you know he works at Hayes International." Rachel looked uncomfortable. "I saw his photo in a business magazine a few years ago. I never reached out. What would be the point? He made it clear he wasn't looking for attachment." Olivia's heart was pounding now. Was his name Alexander? Alexander Hayes? Rachel's eyes widened. "How did you—" She stopped as Maya returned to the table, triumphantly carrying a slice of chocolate cake. The conversation shifted, but the look— Rachel gave Olivia promise they would revisit the subject later. After lunch, Rachel took Maya home to Brooklyn, leaving Olivia alone with her thoughts and a decision. She could let it go, preserve the fragile status quo that her sister seemed to have accepted, or she could seek the truth, potentially upending multiple lives in the process. Back in her apartment, Olivia opened her laptop and typed Alexander Hayes, CEO, into the search bar. Dozens of articles appeared, but few contained personal information beyond his business accomplishments. The man was famously private. There were hardly any photos, just distant shots at business events. His face partially obscured or turned away from cameras. She clicked on images and felt her breath catch. There he was, older than she remembered, more polished, but unmistakably the same man. The intense eyes, the confident set of his shoulders, the slight asymmetry to his smile that had made him seem more approachable, less perfect. Olivia sat, back, her mind racing. Alexander Hayes, billionaire CEO, was almost certainly Maya's father, and for one night 6 years ago, he had been Olivia's lover. The ethical implications were staggering. As an attorney, she understood parental rights and responsibilities. A child had the right to know their heritage, to receive support from both parents. But this wasn't just any situation. This was her sister's life, her niece's future, and a man who had connections to them both in profoundly different ways. Her phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, a job offer from a rival firm. Someone had obviously heard about her partnership rejection. 6 hours ago, this would have been a lifeline. Now it barely registered. Olivia poured herself a glass of wine and stood at her window, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over Manhattan. Hayes International's building was visible from her apartment, its upper floors illuminated like a beacon. Somewhere in that gleaming tower, a man worked late into the evening, unaware that his past was about to collide with his present. She made her decision shortly after midnight. She would approach him directly, professional to professional, no emotional appeals, no accusations, just the facts and an opportunity for him to do the right thing. If he refused, she would support whatever course of action Rachel chose to take. The next morning, Olivia dressed with deliberate care, a charcoal grey suit that conveyed authority without flashiness, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back into a sleek knot. Armor for the confrontation ahead. She didn't call for an appointment. A man like Hayes would be insulated by layers of gatekeepers specifically tasked with keeping unexpected visitors like her at bay. Instead, she used her law firm credentials to gain access to the building, then took the express elevator to the executive floor. The reception area was designed to intimidate. Soaring ceilings, minimalist furnishings in muted greys and blues, a massive abstract painting that probably cost more than her annual salary. "I need to see Mr. Hayes," she told the receptionist, a poised woman with an expertly neutral expression. "Do you have an appointment?" The woman's fingers hovered over her keyboard, ready to confirm what she already knew. "No, but he'll want to see me. Tell him Olivia Bennett is here regarding a personal matter from 6 years ago." The receptionist's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. "Mr. Hayes is in meetings all morning. Perhaps you could leave your card, and someone will contact you to schedule a time." Olivia placed her business card on the desk. "I'll wait." "That could be several hours, Miss Bennett." "I understand." Olivia moved to one of the sleek chairs in the waiting area and sat down, her posture relaxed but determined. She had cancelled her appointments for the day. She had nowhere else to be. 3 hours passed. Olivia reviewed emails on her phone, occasionally glancing up to find the receptionist watching her with growing curiosity. Executives and assistants came and went, some casting questioning looks at the woman who had claimed a corner of their waiting area like she belonged there. Finally, the receptionist's phone lit up. She answered, spoke briefly, then looked up at Olivia. "Mr. Hayes will see you now, down the hall, last door on the right." Olivia stood smoothing her suit jacket. Her heart was racing, but her expression remained composed as she walked down the corridor. She paused briefly outside the imposing double doors, taking a deep breath before knocking firmly. "Come in," called a voice she had not heard in 6 years, yet recognized instantly. She opened the door and stepped into a spacious office, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Alexander Hayes stood behind a massive desk, his back to the door as he gazed out at the skyline. He turned slowly, his expression guarded but curious. Recognition dawned immediately. She saw it in the slight widening of his eyes, the momentary imparting of his lips. He recovered quickly, his face settling into a practiced neutrality that matched her own. "Olivia," he said, her name sounding both familiar and strange on his lips. "This is unexpected. We need to talk," she replied, closing the door behind her. "About the night we met, and about its consequences." Alexander Hayes stood perfectly still, his expression controlled, yet alert, the face of a man accustomed to navigating high-stakes negotiations. He gestured toward a seating area by the windows, away from the imposing desk that separated them. "Please," he said, his voice measured. "Have a seat." Olivia crossed the room, hyper-aware of his gaze following her. The Alexander before her was more polished than the man she remembered, his dark suit impeccably tailored, his movements more deliberate. Success had refined him, but underneath she could still see traces of the man who had made her laugh over champagne, who had looked at her with genuine interest rather than calculation. "I assume this isn't about legal representation," he said, as they sat across from each other in leather chairs that probably cost more than her monthly rent. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Not warm, but not entirely cold either. "Just incautious, no," Olivia confirmed, meeting his gaze directly. "This is about a child, a 5-year-old girl named Maya." She watched his reaction carefully. There was a flicker of something, confusion, then rapid calculation, before his expression settled back into careful neutrality. "I'm afraid you'll need to elaborate," he said after a moment. 6 years ago you met a woman named Rachel Bennett at a gallery opening in Soho. Shortly after your brief relationship, she discovered she was pregnant." Olivia kept her voice steady, professional. "She gave birth to a daughter, Maya Bennett." Alexander's posture stiffened slightly, the only visible sign that her words had affected him. "And you're here because Rachel is my sister." His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her face, recognition dawning. "The charity gala, children's literacy." It wasn't a question. "I didn't make the connection, different last names. I kept our mother's maiden name after our parents divorced. Rachel took our father's," Olivia explained, though the personal detail felt strangely intimate in this sterile setting. Alexander stood abruptly and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. From this angle, with the city spread out beneath him, he looked every bit the powerful CEO, untouchable, removed from ordinary concerns. "Why are you here now, after all this time?" he asked without turning. "If it's about money—" "It's not," Olivia interrupted, a flash of anger breaking through her professional veneer. "My sister has never asked for anything from you. She doesn't even know I'm here." He turned at that, genuine surprise crossing his features. "Then why?" Olivia took a deep breath. "Maya knows you exist. She knows you work in this building. She's starting to ask questions that Rachel can't or won't answer. I believe a child deserves to know where she comes from." Alexander returned to his seat, his movements less fluid now, as though the weight of her words had physically affected him. "You said your sister doesn't know you're here. Why come yourself? Why now?" This was the moment Olivia had rehearsed most carefully in her mind. Yet now that it was here, she found herself hesitating. The truth was complicated, potentially explosive. "I only recently made the connection," she said finally. "Maya mentioned your building yesterday while I was watching her. When I saw your photo online, I recognized you from the gala." Alexander's gaze intensified. "The gala where you and I met." "Yes," the word hung between them, laden with unspoken implications. Olivia watched as he processed what this meant, that he had unknowingly been involved with 2 sisters, that his daughter's aunt was the woman he had spent one night with 6 years ago. "This is," he began, then stopped, apparently at a loss. For words, perhaps for the first time in his carefully controlled life. "Complicated," Olivia supplied. "I'm aware." Alexander stood again, this time moving to a cabinet against the wall. He opened it to reveal a small bar and poured himself what looked like scotch. He gestured with the bottle toward Olivia, who shook her head. It was barely noon, but she didn't judge him for needing the drink. "How certain are you?" he asked after taking a sip. "About Maya being my daughter?" "The timing fits." And Olivia hesitated. "She resembles you, the shape of her eyes, her expressions. Once I saw your photo, it was unmistakable." Alexander nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "I never knew. Rachel never contacted me." Would it have mattered if she had? The question slipped out before Olivia could stop it, sharper than she'd intended. His eyes snapped back to her face. "Yes," he said simply. "It would have. Something in his tone made her believe him, though she hadn't expected to. He set down his glass and returned to his seat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, a more vulnerable posture than any he'd adopted so far. "I should explain about that night," he said, his voice lower now. "With you." Olivia shook her head. "That's not why I'm here." Nevertheless, his gaze was steady, insistent. "I left because I was called away to Tokyo for an emergency acquisition. The company was on the verge of collapse, thousands of jobs at stake. I wrote my number on the back of the note, but when I returned to New York and you hadn't called, I assumed you weren't interested in seeing me again." Olivia frowned. "There was no phone number." Alexander looked genuinely confused. "I wrote it clearly. I remember checking twice because the pen was running out of ink. The note I found had just your first name, nothing else." Even now, the memory stung. Waking up alone, finding that impersonal note, feeling like a fool for believing their connection had been something special. They stared at each other, both recalibrating their understanding of that night 6 years ago. A mistake, perhaps, a misunderstanding, or a convenient story he'd concocted on the spot. Olivia wasn't naive enough to dismiss that possibility. "What do you want from me?" Alexander asked finally, his voice carefully neutral again. "I want you to meet your daughter," Olivia replied. "To acknowledge her, to be part of her life, if you're willing to commit to that responsibility." He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached for a silver frame on the side table between them and handed it to Olivia. Her breath caught as she looked down at the photograph. A little girl with dark curls and serious eyes, sitting on a swing. Maya, the same photo Rachel kept on their mantel at home. "I already know my daughter," Alexander said quietly. Olivia stared at him, confusion giving way to understanding. Then, shock. "You've known all this time?" He took the frame back, looking down at the image with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. "Not all this time. 3 years ago, I saw Rachel with Maya at Hudson River Park. The resemblance was undeniable. I hired investigators, discreetly. I learned everything I could about them." "But you never approached them? Never offered support?" Olivia felt anger rising again, sharper now. "I set up a trust fund for Maya's education, anonymous donations to her school to improve their facilities. I made sure they were taken care of, financially. From a distance, without them knowing." Olivia's voice was cold. "That's not being a father." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Rachel made it clear during our time together that she valued her independence above all else. She told me about growing up with a controlling father, how she'd fought for her autonomy. When I discovered I had a daughter, I respected what I believed would be her wishes. You didn't give her the choice," Olivia countered. "You made assumptions, perhaps." He looked away, out toward the city skyline. "Or perhaps I was protecting myself as well. I built this company from nothing. My life is complex, demanding. I didn't know how to be a father." The admission, unexpectedly vulnerable, softened Olivia's anger slightly. She leaned forward, choosing her next words carefully. "Maya deserves more than financial security. She deserves to know you, if you're willing to be known." Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer in the side table and withdrew a small, leather-bound book. He handed it to Olivia. She opened it to find page after page of notes, observations, Maya's first day of school, her dance recital, her winning a science contest. Dates, times, small details that could only have been gathered through careful, consistent attention. "I've watched her grow from a distance," he said softly. "I've been to every school play, sitting in the back. I've walked past her playground. At lunchtime, I know her favorite ice cream flavor is mint chocolate chip. I know she loves butterflies and hates green peppers." Olivia closed the book, unsure how to feel about this revelation. There was something both touching and disturbing about his secret surveillance, no matter how well-intentioned. "This isn't healthy," she said finally. For any of you. No, he agreed, surprising her. It isn't, but I didn't know another way. He stood and walked to his desk, pressing a button on his phone. Janet, clear my schedule for the rest of the day. He turned back to Olivia. I'd like to meet with Rachel, today, if possible. Will you arrange it? The decisiveness of his tone, the sudden shift from contemplation to action, caught her off guard. This was the Alexander Hayes that business journals wrote about, the man who made billion-dollar decisions without hesitation once he'd determined his course. I'll call her, Olivia said, reaching for her phone, but I should warn you, she may not be receptive. I understand. His expression was resolute. But it's time for this to end, one way or another. Rachel Bennett's apartment in Brooklyn Heights was warm and lived in, a stark contrast to both Olivia's minimalist Tribeca loft and Alexander's sleek executive office. Children's artwork adorned the refrigerator, colorful throw pillows brightened a worn but comfortable sofa, and family photos lined the hallway leading to Maya's room. Olivia stood awkwardly in the kitchen while Rachel paced, her expression cycling between disbelief, anger, and something harder to define. Let me get this straight, Rachel said, keeping her voice low so Maya, who was playing in her bedroom, wouldn't hear. You slept with Alexander Hayes 6 years ago, the same Alexander Hayes who is Maya's father, and now you've gone to him without discussing it with me first, and he's on his way here. Her voice rose slightly at the end, stress fracturing her usual composure. I didn't know he was Maya's father when I approached him, Olivia clarified, though the distinction felt meaningless. No, I only suspected because of what Maya said about the building. Rachel stopped pacing to stare at her sister. That doesn't explain why you took it upon yourself to track him down without talking to me. Olivia had rehearsed this explanation during the tense cab ride from Manhattan, but now her carefully prepared words felt inadequate. Maya deserves to know her father. You deserve child support, acknowledgement. I never asked for any of that, Rachel interrupted. I've managed just fine on my own. Have you, though? Olivia challenged gently. You work 60-hour weeks. You've given up your painting. When was the last time you did something for yourself? Rachel's expression hardened. That's not fair. Being a single parent means making sacrifices. Exactly my point. Why should you sacrifice everything when Maya has a father who could what? Rachel cut in. Sweep in after 5 years and disrupt our lives? Write a check and ease his conscience? What makes you think I want that? The buzzer interrupted. And them? Rachel froze, her face suddenly pale. That's probably him, Olivia said unnecessarily. I can tell him to leave if you're not ready for this. Rachel closed her eyes briefly, then squared her shoulders. No. If we're doing this, let's do it now. She moved to the intercom and pressed the button. Come up. 3rd floor. The minutes waiting for Alexander to arrive stretched painfully. Rachel smoothed her hair, straightened a stack of magazines, then stopped herself, hands clenching at her sides. This is ridiculous. I'm not tidying up for him. Olivia touched her sister's arm gently. You don't owe him anything. This meeting is on your terms. A soft knock at the door ended their conversation. Rachel took a deep breath and opened it. Alexander Hayes stood in the hallway, looking both commanding and oddly vulnerable without the backdrop of his executive office. He'd removed his tie, and his collar was open at the throat, a deliberate attempt to appear less formal, Olivia guessed. In his hands was a small, simply wrapped package. Rachel, he said, his voice quieter than Olivia had heard it before. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Rachel nodded stiffly and stepped back to let him enter. Maya is in her room. She doesn't know you're here. Alexander's gaze moved around the apartment, taking in the details of the home his daughter had grown. A bin. His expression gave little away, but Olivia noticed how his eyes lingered on Maya's artwork, on the growth chart marked in pencil on the kitchen doorframe. You've created a beautiful home. he said finally. Rachel crossed her arms. "Why are you here, Alexander? After all this time?" He set the package down on the coffee table. "Because I should have been here sooner. I made a mistake." "Which one?" The question was sharp, pointed. "All of them," he answered simply. "Not finding you when I returned from Tokyo, not approaching you when I first saw Maya at the park 3 years ago, watching from a distance instead of being present." Rachel's expression faltered for the first time. "You've seen her before? You knew?" Alexander nodded, his composure cracking slightly. "I've known for 3 years. I've attended every school event sitting in the back. I've watched her play in the park. He hesitated. "I've had people making sure you both had what you needed." "People." Rachel's voice was dangerously quiet. "You've had us watched?" "Not watched," he corrected quickly. "Protected, supported. The scholarship Maya received for her art program was from you," Rachel finished, understanding dawning. "The anonymous donor who funded the playground renovation at her school. The mysterious rent freeze on this apartment. 2 years ago when the building changed hands." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I should have known. No one gets that lucky in New York real estate." Alexander didn't deny any of it. "I did what I thought was best without interfering." "In your lives, without interfering," Rachel repeated, her voice rising slightly. "You've been manipulating our lives from behind the scenes for years, and you call that not interfering?" Olivia stepped forward, concerned by her sister's growing agitation. "Maybe we should all sit down. Talk through this calmly." "There's nothing." "A calm about finding out your child's father has been playing puppet master with your life," Rachel shot back, but she sank onto the sofa nonetheless, suddenly looking exhausted. Alexander remained standing, his posture tense. "I never meant to overstep. I just wanted to make sure Maya had opportunities, that you weren't struggling." "Why not just come forward?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious. "You're not the type to shy away from responsibility." He looked at her, then back at Rachel. "The night we met at the gallery, you told me about your father, how controlling he was, how you'd fought for your independence. When I realized Maya was mine, I thought you wouldn't want me involved." Rachel stared at him, her expression softening slightly. "So, instead of asking me what I wanted, you decided to control things from a distance." There was less anger in her voice now, more bewilderment. "Can't you see that's exactly what my father did, making decisions for my own good without consulting me?" Alexander looked genuinely startled by the comparison. "I never thought of it that way," he admitted. A small sound from the hallway drew their attention. Maya stood there in her paint-splattered overalls, clutching a stuffed rabbit, her dark eyes wide as she took in the unfamiliar man in their living room. "Maya," Rachel said, her voice instantly gentler, "I thought you were playing with your new paints." "I got thirsty," Maya replied, but her gaze remained fixed on Alexander. "Who's that?" The room went still. Olivia watched Alexander's face transform as he looked at his daughter up close for the first time, no longer through a camera lens or from across a playground. There was wonder there, and fear, and a tenderness she hadn't thought him capable of. Rachel looked from Maya to Alexander, then back again. Whatever she saw in that moment seemed to make a decision for her. "Maya, this is an old friend who's come to visit us," she said carefully. "His name is Alexander." Maya studied him with the frank curiosity of childhood. "You look like the man in Mommy's special box." Alexander glanced questioningly at Rachel, who flushed slightly. "I kept a photo," she admitted quietly, "from the gallery opening." "Hello, Maya," Alexander said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. He knelt down to her level, maintaining a respectful distance. "Your mum has told me what an amazing artist you are. I'd love to see your painting sometime." Maya tilted her head, considering him. "Do you like butterflies? I'm painting butterflies today." "I do," he replied seriously, "especially the blue ones." Morpho butterflies, Maya said, her expression brightening. Those are my favorite too. Want to see them? I made some with glitter. Alexander looked at Rachel, silently asking permission. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. I'd like that very much, he told Maya, who grabbed his hand without hesitation and began pulling him toward her bedroom, already chattering about watercolors and the butterfly garden at the museum. Left alone in the living room, Olivia and Rachel stared at each other in the sudden quiet. Are you okay? Olivia asked softly. Rachel sank back onto the sofa, looking dazed. I don't know. I've imagined this moment for years, but never like this, never with you involved. I'm sorry, Olivia said, the words feeling woefully inadequate. I should have talked to you first. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then asked, That night with him, was it meaningless? The question caught Olivia off guard. No, she answered honestly. It wasn't, but it was just one night. And now he's Maya's father. Rachel shook her head slightly. Life has a twisted sense of humor. From Maya's bedroom came the sound of delighted laughter, a child's bright giggle followed by a deeper chuckle. The sound seemed to affect Rachel, profoundly. Her eyes filled with tears. She's never lacked for anything, she said softly. But sometimes I've seen her watching fathers with their children at the park. She tries not to let me see her looking. Olivia moved to sit beside her sister, taking her hand. What do you want to happen now? Rachel looked toward Maya's bedroom, her expression conflicted. I don't know, but I think it's time I stopped making decisions based on fear. For both our sakes, the weeks that followed shifted the foundations of all their lives, like tectonic plates realigning after years of pressure. Alexander began with small, careful steps into Maya's world. Weekend visits to the Butterfly Conservatory, lunch at her favorite pizza place with the checkerboard tablecloths, an afternoon helping her build a volcano for her science project. Always with Rachel present, always respecting the boundaries of the life mother and daughter had built without him. Olivia kept her distance at first, uncertain of her place in this delicate new arrangement. She threw herself into negotiating her exit from Morgan & Hayes, finalizing a position with a boutique firm that specialized in non-profit law, a direction she'd always been interested in but had never pursued in her single-minded climb toward. In partnership, it was Alexander who reached out to her directly, calling her office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after their confrontation in his office. I'd like to meet, he said without preamble when she answered. To talk. About everything. They met at a small cafe in the West Village, far from both their usual territories. Alexander arrived first, already seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He'd dressed down in dark jeans and a grey sweater, looking more like the man she'd met at the charity gala than the imposing CEO. Thank you for coming, he said as she sat across from him. How are things with Maya, with Rachel? Olivia asked, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Better than I deserve, he admitted. Maya is... He paused, searching for words. Extraordinary. So open, so curious. And Rachel has been more gracious than I had any right to expect. Olivia nodded, unsurprised by her sister's capacity for forgiveness. Rachel doesn't hold grudges. It's annoyingly virtuous. A small smile tugged at Alexander's mouth. A family trait, apparently. Don't be too sure about that, Olivia replied, though without real heat. I'm still processing everything. That's partly why I wanted to talk to you, Alexander said, his expression growing serious. I owe you an explanation about that night. Olivia shook her head. That was 6 years ago. It's ancient history. Is it? He studied her face carefully. Because I think about it more than I should, especially now. The admission caught her off guard. She'd assumed their night together had been forgettable for him, one of many such encounters for a powerful man like Alexander Hayes. I meant what I said in my office, he continued. I wrote my number on that note. When you didn't call, I thought you weren't interested. I considered trying to find you, but—" He shrugged slightly. "My pride got in the way." "Why does it matter now?" Olivia asked, her voice quiet but direct. "We're connected through Maya. That's complicated enough without dredging up the past." Alexander's gaze remained steady. "Because I don't believe in coincidences of this magnitude. Meeting you, then Rachel. Maya bringing you to my building. There's a pattern here that feels significant." "Or just incredibly bad luck," Olivia countered. She took a sip of her coffee, using the moment to gather her thoughts. "Look, whatever might have happened between us is irrelevant now. Maya needs stability, not confusion. Rachel is my sister. I won't complicate her life further." "Rachel and I had a long conversation yesterday," Alexander said, surprising her again. "About the future, about what Maya needs." Olivia tensed. "And?" "We're going to try co-parenting. Formally. I'm buying the apartment next to hers and connecting them. Maya will have her space in both. Rachel keeps full custody, but I'll be present, involved." His voice was calm, but his eyes revealed his emotion. "It's more than I hoped for." "That sounds reasonable," Olivia said carefully, "if it's what Rachel wants." "It was her suggestion," Alexander replied. "She's remarkable. I see where Maya gets her generosity of spirit." They fell silent for a moment, the sounds of the cafe washing over them, the hiss of the espresso machine, murmured conversations, rain pattering against the windows. "What about you?" Alexander finally asked. "Rachel mentioned you're leaving your firm." Olivia nodded. "I start at Caldwell and Park next month. Smaller firm, more meaningful work, less money, but some things are worth more than money." He finished for her. "I understand that better now." Something in his tone made her look up, catching an expression in his eyes that sent a ripple of awareness through her. The same connection she'd felt that night at the gala. She broke the gaze first. "I should go," she said, reaching for her coat. "I have a meeting with the partners at 4. Alexander stood as she did. "There's something else I wanted to ask you. Maya's birthday is next month. Rachel is planning a small party at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. They're having a butterfly exhibition. Maya would like you to be there." "Of course I'll be there," Olivia said, surprised he'd even ask. "She's my niece." "And I'd like you to be there," he added, quietly, as more than just Maya's aunt. Olivia went still. "Alexander—" "I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate," he said quickly. "I know the situation is complex, but I'd like the chance to know you again, properly this time, without any misunderstandings between us." "There's too much history," Olivia protested. "Too many complications." "Perhaps," he acknowledged, "or perhaps this is exactly how it was meant to unfold. Not many people get a second chance to make a first impression." Despite herself, Olivia felt a smile tugging at her lips. That was terribly rehearsed. Alexander laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "Completely. I practiced in the car on the way here." The moment of levity broke the tension, and Olivia found herself relaxing slightly. "I'm not making any promises," she said, "but I'll think about it." "That's all I'm asking," he replied. "Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel." Outside the cafe, rain fell steadily, casting the city in soft grey light. Alexander hailed a taxi for her, his hand warm on her elbow as he helped her inside. Before closing the door, he leaned down slightly. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "that night 6 years ago was significant to me. I've never forgotten it." Before she could respond, he closed the door and stepped back, raising a hand in farewell as the taxi pulled away. Olivia leaned back against the seat, her mind swirling with complicated emotions. The situation defied all conventional wisdom, crossed boundaries most would consider sacred. and yet she couldn't deny the persistent feeling that had been growing since that day in Alexander's office, that perhaps some connections, however, unlikely or ill-timed, were meant to be explored. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Maya wants to know if you'll help with her butterfly costume for the school play. Apparently I lack the necessary artistic vision." Attached was a photo of Maya grinning widely, her face smeared with blue paint. Alexander visible in the background, looking both amused and slightly overwhelmed by whatever craft project had exploded. Across Rachel's living room, it was messy and complicated, and nothing like the ordered life Olivia had planned for herself. But looking at that photo, at the genuine joy on her niece's face, at the unexpected family taking shape around her, Olivia felt something shift inside her, a willingness to consider possibilities she'd never allowed herself to imagine. She typed back a response, "Tell her Aunt Livy will be there Saturday," with glitter. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she opened her messages to the number Alexander had given her and wrote, "For Maya's birthday, I'll be there, as her aunt. But perhaps after that, we can talk about second chances." Some paths were complicated, twisted by time and circumstance. But perhaps the most meaningful journeys rarely followed a straight line. The Brooklyn Botanic Garden had transformed its central pavilion into a wonderland of butterflies for Maya's 6th birthday. Glass walls revealed the lush greenery outside, where spring had finally arrived after the long winter, pale sunshine warming the pathways between carefully tended beds of early flowers. Inside, delicate paper butterflies hung from gossamer threads alongside the real specimens that fluttered between tropical plants, creating a magical atmosphere that had Maya bouncing with excitement. "Aunt Livy, you came!" Maya rushed toward. Olivia, as she entered, nearly toppling the gift box, balanced in her arms. The child wore a blue dress with butterfly appliques that Olivia had helped her select the weekend before, her dark curls restrained by a headband that sparkled with tiny crystals. "Of course I came," Olivia said, kneeling to accept Maya's enthusiastic hug. "I wouldn't miss your special day." Rachel approached more slowly, looking more relaxed than Olivia had seen her in years. She wore a simple green dress that complemented her eyes, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of in her usual practical bun. The butterfly costume was a hit at the school play, Rachel said by way of greeting. "Maya's teacher asked if you'd consider joining the parent committee for the spring festival." Olivia laughed. "I think my glitter application skills are being vastly overestimated." "Hardly. You're the only adult I know who can apply glitter without it ending up in every crevice of the apartment for months afterward." Rachel glanced over her shoulder. "Alexander's getting the cake set up. He went a bit overboard, as usual." There was no judgment in her tone, just a kind of bemused acceptance that had developed over the past month as they'd all adjusted to their new reality. Olivia had watched her sister navigate the complex situation with grace, establishing clear boundaries while allowing Alexander space to develop his relationship with Maya. "How are things going with the apartment renovation?" Olivia asked, surprisingly. "Well, the contractor says they'll be finished next week." Rachel lowered her voice. "Alexander wanted to buy the entire floor and build some kind of children's paradise, but I convinced him Maya doesn't need a rock-climbing wall in her bedroom." Olivia smiled, recognizing the pattern that had emerged, Alexander's tendency toward grand gestures tempered by Rachel's practical nature. It seemed to work for them, this careful co-parenting dance they were creating. She spotted Alexander across the room, arranging a spectacular butterfly-shaped cake that must have cost a fortune. He looked up at that moment, catching her eye, and smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that still caught her off guard each time she saw it. They had maintained a careful distance since their coffee shop conversation, limiting their interactions to group settings with Maya and Rachel. Today would be the first time they'd have a chance to talk privately if the opportunity arose. "Go say hello," Rachel said quietly, noticing the exchange. "It's okay. We've talked about this." Olivia glanced at her sister, surprised. "You have?" Rachel shrugged. "Life is complicated. We're all adults trying to figure it out." She gave Olivia a gentle push. "Maya wants to show you the blue morpho exhibit anyway. Alexander can take you both." Before Olivia could respond, Maya grabbed her hand, tugging insistently. "Come see the blue ones. Daddy says they're the rarest kind." The word daddy still sounded new on Maya's tongue, but she used it with increasing comfort, a development that had brought tears to Alexander's eyes the first time he'd heard it, though he'd quickly masked the emotion. "Lead the way. Birthday." "Oh, girl," Olivia said, allowing herself to be pulled toward the butterfly enclosure, where Alexander waited. He looked different today, more relaxed in casual clothes, a light blue button-down rolled at the sleeves and khaki pants. Less the imposing CEO, more the father celebrating his daughter's birthday. "The guest of honor has arrived," he said to Maya, with a small bow that made her giggle. Then, to Olivia, "I'm glad you could make it." "I brought reinforcements," Olivia replied, lifting the gift box. Butterfly identification books and a proper magnifying glass, essential equipment for future explorations. Maya's eyes widened. "Can I open it now? Please." "Presents after cake," Alexander reminded her gently. "But first, the blue morphos. I've been promised they're spectacular." The butterfly enclosure was a separate glass structure, warm and humid, filled with lush tropical plants. Maya raced ahead, her dress fluttering like wings as she searched for the elusive blue butterflies. "She's thriving," Olivia observed, as they followed at a more sedate pace. "This arrangement seems to be working." Alexander nodded, watching Maya, with undisguised adoration. "Better than I could have hoped. Rachel has been extraordinarily understanding." "She's always been the better person between us," Olivia admitted. "I wouldn't say that." Alexander's voice was quiet, but firm. "You're the one who forced me to confront my mistakes, who pushed me to be better, to be present." They paused beside a flowering plant, where several butterflies had gathered, their wings opening and closing lazily in the humid air. "I've been thinking about what you said," Olivia ventured after a moment, "about second chances." Alexander turned to face her fully, his expression careful but hopeful. "And it's unconventional, to say the least." She chose her words deliberately. "There are 1,000 reasons why it's complicated, why it might not work." "I'm aware," he acknowledged. "But sometimes the most worthwhile things are complicated." "Daddy!" "Aunt Livy, look!" Maya's excited call interrupted them. She stood a few feet away, her finger extended with a brilliant blue butterfly perched delicately on the tip. Her face was transformed with wonder, dark eyes wide beneath lashes that were so like Alexander's. They moved toward her together, united in their shared affection for this child who had, through a series of unlikely events, brought them all together. "Don't move," Alexander instructed softly. "Just enjoy it." The blue morpho's wings opened slowly, revealing their iridescent azure surface, a blue so vibrant it seemed almost electric against Maya's skin. The three of them stood perfectly still, watching in silent appreciation of the moment's fragile beauty. Later, after cake had been served and presents opened, after Maya had exhausted herself racing around the garden with her friends, Olivia found herself standing with Alexander on a quiet path away from the celebration. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the walkway. "What happens now?" she asked, finally addressing the question that had hung between them for weeks. Alexander considered her question carefully. "That depends. On you, on what you're comfortable with. And if I said I wanted to explore the possibility, slowly, carefully, then I would suggest dinner," he replied with a small smile. "Just the two of us. A proper first date." Olivia felt herself smiling in return. That sounds reasonable. I've learned that reasonable is underrated, Alexander said, especially when the alternative is missing something potentially extraordinary. From the pavilion came the sound of children's laughter, Rachel's voice calling Maya for one last birthday activity, their complicated, unexpected family, still finding its shape, still learning its boundaries. "We should get back," Olivia said, though she made no move to leave. Alexander nodded, but remained beside her. Carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he reached for her hand. His fingers were warm as they interlaced with hers, the connection simple but significant. "For what it's worth," he said. Quietly, "I believe some things are meant to find their way, however circuitous the path." Olivia squeezed his hand once before releasing it, ready to return to the celebration, but carrying the warmth of the moment with her. "Let's find out." Summer descended on New York City with relentless heat, transforming the concrete landscape into a shimmering mirage. 3 months had passed since Maya's birthday party at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. 3 months of careful steps forward, of boundaries established and respected, of a new pattern emerging among the 4 of them. The renovation connecting Rachel and Alexander's apartments had been completed in May, creating an unconventional living arrangement that somehow worked. Maya moved freely between both spaces, delighting in having her father nearby while maintaining the security of her life with Rachel. Alexander had scaled back his working hours, delegating more responsibilities to his executive team so he could be present for evening homework and weekend outings. For Olivia, the summer had brought its own transformations. Her new position at Caldwell & Park had revitalized her passion for law, allowing her to represent environmental nonprofits and educational foundations instead of corporate giants. The pay cut had been substantial, but the satisfaction immeasurable. She had even begun mentoring a group of high school girls interested in legal careers, something she would never have had time for at Morgan & Hayes. And then there was Alexander. True to his word, he had suggested dinner, a quiet restaurant in the West Village where they had talked for hours, carefully navigating the complexity of their situation. That first date had led to a second, then a third. Coffee on Sunday. Mornings, walking through the Metropolitan Museum on a rainy afternoon. Simple, unhurried moments that allowed them to discover each other properly, without the shadows of the past or the pressure of their unusual circumstances. Rachel had been surprisingly supportive, telling Olivia over wine one evening, "Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes we have to rewrite the rules." Tonight was different, though. For the first time, Alexander had invited Olivia to his apartment, not the connected space he shared with Maya, but his primary residence, a penthouse overlooking Central Park that he'd kept as his private retreat. The invitation felt significant, a new level of trust and intimacy in their carefully constructed relationship. As the elevator ascended to the top floor, Olivia found herself unexpectedly nervous. They had agreed to take things slowly, to prioritize Maya's stability above all else, but standing here about to enter Alexander's most personal space, she couldn't help feeling they were crossing an invisible threshold. The elevator doors opened directly into a foyer of warm wood and soft lighting. Alexander stood waiting, more casual than she typically saw him, in dark jeans and a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to reveal tanned forearms. "You came," he said simply, as if he'd been uncertain until this moment. "I said I would." Olivia stepped into the apartment, immediately struck by how different it was from what she'd expected. No stark minimalism or ostentatious luxury. Instead, the space was warm and inviting. Comfortable furniture in rich fabrics, walls lined with bookshelves, art that spoke of personal taste rather than investment value. "This isn't what I imagined," she admitted, accepting the glass of wine he offered. Alexander smiled. Let me guess. You were expecting chrome and glass? Perhaps a shark tank or a painting worth more than most people's homes? Something like that, she acknowledged with a laugh. This is real, lived in. I spend enough time in sterile boardrooms, he said, leading her through to a terrace that offered a breathtaking view of the park below, twilight settling over the treetops. I wanted a home, not a showpiece. They settled into comfortable chairs, the early evening air still warm but pleasant. For a while they talked of ordinary things, her latest case, a challenging client he was dealing with, Maya's growing obsession with astronomy that had replaced her butterfly phase. Then Alexander set his glass down, his expression growing more serious. I wanted you to come here tonight because I need to tell you something about the past. Olivia tensed slightly. That sounds ominous. It's not, he assured her quickly. Just something I should have shared sooner. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The night we met at the gala, it wasn't coincidence. I knew who you were. Olivia stared at him, processing his words. What do you mean? I'd seen you before, arguing a case in court. I was there for another matter, but I stayed to watch you. His expression was open, honest. You were brilliant, passionate. I asked around, learned your name, found out about the gala. You sought me out deliberately. Olivia wasn't sure how to feel about this revelation. Alexander nodded. I'd never done anything like that before, but there was something about you, your intelligence, your intensity. I wanted to meet you properly, outside of a professional context. Why tell me this now? Because we've built this relationship on honesty, he replied. And as we move forward, I don't want any secrets between us, not even well-intentioned ones. Olivia considered his admission, surprised to find she wasn't upset. If anything, it added another layer to their complex history, another thread in the unlikely tapestry that had brought them together. Thank you for telling me, she said finally. It doesn't change how I feel about now. Relief crossed his features. There's something else I wanted to show you. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. Something few people have seen. He led her back inside, past the living room, to a door she hadn't noticed before. It opened to reveal a room unlike any other in the apartment, walls covered with photographs, sketches, and children's artwork. Maya's artwork. Images of her from infancy through to present day, carefully preserved and displayed with obvious love. My private gallery, Alexander said softly. I started it when I first discovered Maya was my daughter. Every photo I could find, every glimpse of her life I could capture from a distance. Olivia moved slowly through the room, taking in this physical manifestation of Alexander's complicated love for his daughter. A love that had existed in silence for years before finding its voice. When I was a boy, he continued quietly, my father left us without a word, no support, no contact. I swore I would never do that to my child. When I discovered Maya, I didn't know how to be present without disrupting her life, so I created this, a way to be connected even from afar. Olivia turned to face him, seeing vulnerability in his expression that he rarely allowed anyone to witness. And now you don't need this anymore. You're part of her life. Yes, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. Thanks to you. He reached for her then, drawing her close in a gesture that felt both protective and seeking protection. Olivia leaned into him, understanding with sudden clarity that their unusual path had led them exactly where they were meant to be. Stay, he whispered against her hair. Not a demand, not a seduction, just a simple request for presence, for continuation. I'm not going anywhere, she replied, and knew she meant it in all the ways that mattered. Autumn painted Central Park in brilliant shades of amber and gold, the leaves creating a natural canopy over the path where Olivia and Maya walked hand in hand. A year had passed since that fateful day when Maya had pointed to Alexander's building, a year of profound changes, difficult conversations, and unexpected joy. "Do you think Daddy will like my science project?" Maya asked, skipping alongside. Olivia, at 7, she had Alexander's analytical mind and Rachel's artistic sensibilities, a combination that made her science projects distinctly creative. "He'll love it," Olivia assured her. "A solar system made of recycled materials. It combines all his favorite things: astronomy, sustainability, and most importantly, you." Maya beamed, satisfied with this assessment. "And after we show him, we're all having dinner together, right? You, me, Daddy, and Mom?" "That's the plan," Olivia confirmed, marveling at how normal this arrangement had become to Maya. The child had adapted to their unconventional family with remarkable resilience, accepting the complex relationships between the adults in her life with the simple understanding that she was loved, abundantly and by all of them. They reached the boathouse where Alexander waited, his tall figure easy to spot among the weekend crowds. He smiled as they approached, kneeling to embrace Maya and accept her excited account of the planetary models she'd constructed from bottle caps and cardboard. Then he rose to greet Olivia with a kiss, brief but tender, no longer tentative. "Or uncertain," Rachel called, he said as they walked toward the cafe. "She's finishing up a meeting with her new gallery agent. She'll meet us at the restaurant." Olivia nodded, pleased by this update. Rachel had recently returned to painting, her passion rekindled after years of focusing solely on motherhood and survival. A small gallery in Soho had offered to represent her work, landscapes that captured New York's hidden natural spaces, scenes most city dwellers rushed past without noticing. The change in Rachel over the past year had been remarkable, with Alexander fully engaged as Maya's father, sharing both financial responsibilities and parenting duties. Rachel had found space to rediscover herself. The siblings were closer than they had been since childhood. The initial awkwardness of their situation transformed into a unique bond forged through their mutual love for Maya. As they settled at a table overlooking the lake, Maya immediately pulled out her sketchbook, continuing a drawing of ducks she'd started earlier. Alexander watched her with undisguised pride before turning his attention to Olivia. "I had an interesting call this morning," he said, his tone casual but his eyes intent. "From the Hansen Foundation. They're looking for someone to lead their legal team focused on educational equity." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "The Hansen Foundation. That's impressive. What did you tell them?" "That I knew the perfect person for the position." His expression was both serious and tender. "Someone brilliant, passionate about making a difference, with experience in both corporate law and non-profit work. You recommended me without asking first?" There was no real reproach in her tone, just surprise. Alexander smiled. "I gave them your name. The choice to pursue it is entirely yours, but I thought you should know about the opportunity." Olivia considered this. Her work at Caldwell and Park had been fulfilling, but the Hansen Foundation operated on a national scale, with the potential to impact educational policy across the country. It was the kind of position she might have dismissed as unattainable in her previous life. "I'll think about it," she said, though they both knew she would more than think about it. The spark in her eyes betrayed her excitement at the possibility. Maya looked up from her drawing. "Is Aunt Livy going to have a new job?" "Maybe," Olivia replied. "Would that be okay with you?" Maya considered this with adorable seriousness. "Will you still have time to help me with projects and stuff?" "Always," Olivia promised, reaching out to tuck a stray curl behind Maya's ear. "Some things are non-negotiable." Alexander's hand found hers under the table, a warm, reassuring presence. Their eyes met in silent understanding. Whatever changes came, they would navigate them together, this unexpected family they had built from complexity and second chances. Later, as they walked. Toward the restaurant where Rachel would meet them, Maya ran ahead to watch a street performer, always drawn to music and movement. Alexander slowed his pace, keeping Maya in sight but creating a moment of privacy. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice quiet, "about the future, about us." Olivia glanced at him, recognizing the particular tone that meant he had been contemplating. "Something significant. That sounds serious." "It is." He stopped walking entirely, turning to face her. "This year has been unexpected in every way, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small blue box. Not velvet, not the traditional jeweler's case she might have expected, but a handcrafted wooden box with a butterfly inlaid in the lid. "Alexander," she breathed, understanding immediately. "Not yet," he said quickly. "Not today, but soon, when you're ready, when we're all ready. I just wanted you to know that's where we're headed, if you want it too." Olivia looked from the unopened box to Maya, then back to Alexander. The journey that had brought them here had been anything but straightforward, filled with misunderstandings, painful truths, and careful reconciliations. Yet somehow the complications had forged something stronger than might have developed on a simpler path. "I do," she said simply, "when the time is right." He returned the box to his pocket, then leaned forward to kiss her, a promise sealed between them as Maya danced in the autumn sunlight and Rachel approached in the distance, all four lives now inextricably, improbably entwined. Winter sunshine streamed through the tall windows of the Hanson Foundation's conference room, casting long rectangles of light across the polished table where Olivia sat reviewing final documents for the educational initiative she had spearheaded over the past 18 months. 2 years had passed since she'd accepted the position Alexander had recommended, 2 years of challenging work that had revitalized her legal career and given it meaning beyond billable hours and corporate victories. A gentle knock at the door interrupted her concentration. Rachel entered, carrying a portfolio case that contained her latest paintings, a commissioned series for the Foundation's new headquarters. "Am I interrupting?" Rachel asked, though the easy smile they now shared suggested she knew the answer. Welcome interruption," Olivia replied, setting aside her papers. "I could use a break from legal jargon. Let me see what you've brought." Rachel carefully extracted 3 small watercolors that captured the essence of urban education. A child reading beneath a flowering tree that pushed through concrete, students gathered around a microscope with expressions of wonder, a diverse group of hands reaching toward a glowing light bulb. The images were simultaneously realistic and dreamlike, infused with Rachel's distinctive style that had garnered increasing attention in the New York art scene. "These are extraordinary," Olivia said, genuinely impressed by her sister's talent. "The Foundation board will love them." Rachel's smile widened. "I hope so. The gallery sold out my last exhibition, but this commission means more personally." She carefully returned the paintings to her portfolio. "Are we still on for dinner?" "Tonight. Maya's been talking about it all week." "Absolutely. Alexander made reservations at that Italian place she loves." Olivia glanced at her watch. "He's picking her up from her science program at 4. The ease with which they discussed these family arrangements still occasionally struck Olivia as remarkable. What had once been tense and uncertain had evolved into a comfortable rhythm, their unconventional family structure now as natural as breathing. "Have you told him yet?" Rachel asked, her expression shifting to something more serious. Olivia shook her head. "Not yet. I wanted to be certain first." She unconsciously touched her abdomen, still flat beneath her tailored suit. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday, 12 weeks. Rachel reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "He'll be thrilled, Liv. You both will be amazing parents." "I know," Olivia agreed, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed her features. "It's just complicated, isn't it?" Maya has been the center of his world, of all our worlds, really. And she'll continue to be, Rachel said firmly. This baby won't change how much Maya is loved. If anything, she's going to be the most enthusiastic big sister imaginable. She's been campaigning for a sibling since Zoe in her class got a baby brother. Olivia laughed, remembering Maya's detailed presentations on why she should have a sibling, complete with charts and a surprisingly sophisticated cost-benefit analysis that could only have come from Alexander's influence. "You're right," she acknowledged. "I just want to tell him privately first, then Maya. Make sure everyone has space to process." Always the lawyer, managing all contingencies, Rachel teased gently. "But some things in life can't be perfectly planned, you know. Some of the best things happen when we least expect them." The truth of this statement wasn't lost on either of them. Their entire family had been formed from unexpected circumstances, from chances and coincidences that defied logical planning. Rachel gathered her portfolio and stood. "I should go. I'm meeting with the framer before picking up Maya's costume for the school play." At the door, she paused. "Liv? I'm happy for you, for all of us." After Rachel left, Olivia returned to her work, but her mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. The small velvet box hidden in her desk drawer contained the ring Alexander had shown her in the park over a year ago. The ring she had finally accepted 6 months later in a quiet moment at home, with Maya as their witness and Rachel taking photographs. Tonight, she would give him news that would once again reshape their family. Not a disruption, but an expansion of the love that had somehow flourished in the most unlikely soil. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Meeting running late. We'll meet you at the restaurant. Maya says to remind you that bow ties are mandatory attire tonight." Olivia smiled, remembering Maya's insistence that their monthly family dinner should have a theme. Tonight was Fancy Italian Restaurant Owner, Maya's current career aspiration after a cooking class at school. She texted back, "Bow tie packed. See you at 7. I have news." His response came seconds later. "Good news or I need wine first news?" "The best kind," she replied. "The unexpected kind." As she gathered her papers and prepared to leave the office, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a one-night stand to a chance encounter years later, from strangers to co-parents to family, from past mistakes to future possibilities. It hadn't been a straight path. It hadn't been an easy one. But standing here now with a wedding band on her finger, a new life growing within her, Olivia couldn't imagine any other way their story could have unfolded. Some connections, she had learned, were meant to be. Even if the timing wasn't perfect, even if the circumstances were complicated, sometimes the most beautiful outcomes grew from the most unlikely beginnings. She placed her hand over her abdomen once more, a quiet promise to the newest chapter of their unconventional, extraordinary family story. The restaurant buzzed with the warm chatter of diners and the soft clink of silverware against fine china. String lights hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the private room Alexander had reserved for their family dinner. Maya sat at the head of the table, wearing a miniature chef's hat alongside her promised bow tie, solemnly approving each dish as the waiter presented it with a gravitas that made it difficult for the adults not to smile. "This pasta has passed my inspection," she declared, waving her hand regally before digging in with considerably less decorum. Alexander caught Olivia's eye across the table, his expression a mixture of amusement and adoration. He looked distinguished in his own bow tie, a concession to Maya's theme that he'd embraced wholeheartedly. Beside him, Rachel was explaining to Maya why real Italian restaurants didn't actually serve spaghetti with meatballs, a cultural lesson that the 7-year-old received with skepticism. "But it's the best part," Maya protested, twirling pasta around her fork with surprising dexterity. Authenticity is overrated sometimes, Alexander agreed, winking at his daughter. Innovation comes from breaking traditions, says the businessman, Rachel teased. Some traditions exist for a reason. Like our family dinners, Maya interjected with the particular wisdom of childhood. We do them because they're important, right? Olivia felt a surge of emotion at the simple observation. Exactly right, sweet girl. Some traditions are worth keeping. The evening progressed, with the comfortable familiarity they had established over the past 2 years. Stories from Maya's school, updates on Rachel's upcoming exhibition, discussions about Alexander's latest sustainability initiative. Through it all, Olivia remained quieter than usual, the weight of her news creating a pleasant anticipation that she wasn't quite ready to release. When dessert arrived, tiramisu for the adults and gelato for Maya, Alexander reached across the table to take Olivia's hand. "You've been mysterious all evening," he said softly. "Your text mentioned news." Rachel caught Olivia's eye and gave an encouraging nod before turning to Maya. "Hey, chef, want to come see the pizza oven? I bet if we ask nicely, they'll show us how it works." Maya abandoned her gelato immediately, excitement overriding her sweet tooth. "Can we throw the dough in the air?" "We can definitely ask," Rachel promised, leading her away with a backward glance at Olivia that communicated silent support. Alone. Now, Alexander studied Olivia's face with the attentive focus that had first drawn her to him years ago at the charity gala. "What is it, love? You seem different tonight." Olivia took a deep breath, suddenly finding her carefully prepared words inadequate. Instead, she reached into her purse and withdrew a small envelope, sliding it across the table toward him. Alexander opened it with curious fingers, removing a black-and-white image that at first glance might have been abstract art. Then understanding dawned, his eyes widening as he recognized the sonogram for what it was. "Olivia," he whispered, his voice catching, "is this—" 12 weeks yesterday, she confirmed, her own voice steady despite the emotion building in her chest. "Due in summer." Alexander stared at the image for a long moment, tracing the tiny profile with gentle fingers. When he looked up, his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I never thought I'd have this chance again," he said softly. "After Maya, after missing so much of her early life, I'd made peace with that chapter being closed." "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, though his expression had already answered her question. Alexander moved from his chair to kneel beside hers, one hand still holding the sonogram, the other reaching for hers. "Beyond words," he assured her. "A second chance at fatherhood, but this time from the very beginning. With you." He leaned forward to kiss her, a gentle press of lips that conveyed more than passionate declarations could have. When they parted, Olivia glanced toward the kitchen doors. "Maya should be the next to know," she said, "before we tell anyone else." Alexander nodded in agreement. "How do you think she'll take it?" "According to Rachel, she's been lobbying for a sibling for months." "That sounds like our girl," Alexander laughed, "always 3 steps ahead of us." As if summoned by their conversation, Maya returned with Rachel, her chef's hat slightly askew and a dusting of flour on her nose. "They let me throw the dough," she announced triumphantly, "and the pizza man said I have natural talent." "Of course, you do," Alexander said, rising to his feet but keeping the sonogram carefully in his hand. "Maya, sweetheart, come sit with us for a minute. Olivia and I have something important to tell you." Maya climbed into the chair between them, looking from one to the other with bright, curious eyes. "Is it a surprise? I love surprises." "It is," Olivia confirmed, "a very special one." As they shared their news with the little girl who had unwittingly brought them all together 6 years ago, Olivia felt the final piece of their unlikely puzzle click into place. Their family, unconventional, complicated, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection, was about to begin a new chapter. And this time, they would write it together. from the very first page. Spring painted Central Park in delicate shades of green and pink, cherry blossoms releasing their petals to dance on the gentle breeze. Olivia sat on a bench near the lake, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her abdomen, now visible beneath her flowing dress. At 26 weeks, the pregnancy had transformed her body, and in quieter ways, her perspective on the journey that had brought her here. Maya skipped stones across the water's surface, her concentration evident in the furrow of her brow, an expression so like Alexander's that it still occasionally startled Olivia. At 7, nearly 8, Maya had embraced the news of a sibling with typical enthusiasm, immediately launching into detailed plans for sharing her expertise as the big sister who knows everything important already. "That's 7 skips," Maya called out triumphantly, turning to make sure Olivia had witnessed her achievement. "My personal best!" "Impressive," Olivia acknowledged. "You've been practicing?" "Dad showed me the perfect technique." Maya selected another stone with careful deliberation. "It's all about the angle and the force applied at release." Olivia smiled at the technical explanation. Maya increasingly mirrored Alexander's analytical approach to the world, though tempered by Rachel's artistic sensibilities, a blend that made her uniquely herself. "Where is your dad, anyway?" Olivia checked her watch. "He was supposed to meet us here 20 minutes ago." Maya shrugged with the casual unconcern of childhood. "Probably work stuff. He said something about a big meeting when he dropped me at Mum's yesterday." As if summoned by their conversation, Alexander appeared on the path, walking briskly toward them. Even from a distance, Olivia could tell something significant had happened. There was an energy in his movement, a barely contained excitement that piqued her curiosity. "Sorry I'm late," he called as he approached, bending to kiss Olivia before accepting Maya's enthusiastic hug. "The board meeting ran longer than expected." "Is everything okay?" Olivia asked, noting the unusual brightness in his eyes. "Better than okay." Alexander sat beside her, one arm around Maya, who leaned against him contentedly. "The board approved my proposal, all of it, without modifications." Olivia's eyes widened. For months, Alexander had been working on a radical restructuring of Hayes International, transforming it from a traditional corporation into a benefit corporation that balanced profit with social and environmental impact. The plan included employee ownership, carbon-neutral operations, and dedicating 30% of profits to educational initiatives in underserved communities. They agreed to everything, even the profit-sharing model. Olivia couldn't hide her surprise. Corporate boards rarely embraced such fundamental changes without resistance. "Unanimously," Alexander confirmed, the satisfaction evident in his voice. "It helped that our sustainability initiatives from last year actually increased profitability. Turns out doing good can be good business." "That's wonderful." Olivia squeezed his hand. "I know how much this meant to you." "It means our child will inherit a company with purpose," Alexander said, his voice softening as he glanced at her pregnant belly. "Something worth building upon, not just profit margins and market share." Maya, who had been listening with the selective attention of childhood, perked up at the mention of the baby. "Did he kick again? Can I feel?" "She," Alexander corrected automatically, continuing their good-natured disagreement about the baby's gender. They had decided not to learn officially, but each had formed their own conviction. "The baby," Olivia compromised diplomatically, guiding Maya's small hand to the spot where movement had been most active. "And yes, very active today." Maya's face lit up as she felt a distinct kick against her palm. "Whoa, that was a big one." She leaned closer to Olivia's belly. "Hello in there. It's your big sister. You need to calm down because Olivia needs to rest sometimes, okay?" the simple way Maya referred to her, not as mom or stepmom, but simply as Olivia, carried no rejection. It was merely the natural terminology their unique family had developed. Maya had Rachel as her mother. Olivia occupied a different but equally important role in her life. "What about names?" Maya asked suddenly, straightening up. "Have you decided?" "Yet, because I still think Galaxia is a perfect name," Alexander laughed. "We're still considering all options," he said diplomatically, exchanging an amused glance with Olivia over Maya's head. "But Galaxia is definitely unique." "It's because of the stars," Maya explained seriously. "Everyone should be named for something beautiful." As Maya returned to her stone skipping, Alexander's arm slipped around Olivia's shoulders, pulling her gently against him. "She's not wrong," he murmured, "about being named for something beautiful." Olivia leaned into his embrace, watching Maya's determined attempts to break her record. The unconventional path that had brought them here, from a chance encounter to misunderstanding to reconciliation, seemed less important now than where it had led them. To this moment, this family, this future they were building together. 5 years ago, I never would have imagined this, she said softly. Alexander's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most perfect destinations. Summer arrived with sweltering heat that shimmered above the Manhattan pavement, turning the city into a concrete furnace. In the air-conditioned sanctuary of their Upper West Side apartment, Olivia stood by the nursery window, gently rocking the small bundle in her arms. At 2 weeks old, Sophia Grace Hayes had her father's intense gaze and her mother's determined chin, a perfect blend of them both. Just as Maya had predicted. "She looks like she's contemplating the meaning of life," Rachel observed from the doorway, her voice soft to avoid disturbing the baby's peaceful state. "Or her next meal," Olivia replied with a tired smile. "She's definitely inherited Alexander's appetite." Rachel crossed the room to peer down at her niece, her expression softening. "She's perfect, Liv. Absolutely perfect." Sophia's tiny fingers had wrapped around one of Olivia's, holding on with surprising strength. The fierce love Olivia felt, looking at this small miracle, still overwhelmed her at unexpected moments. A love different from, but just as powerful as, what she felt for Maya. "How's our big girl doing with all this?" Olivia asked, carefully transferring Sophia to the bassinet as her eyelids finally fluttered closed in sleep. "Are you kidding? She's in full big sister mode," Rachel laughed quietly. "She's created a color-coded chart for Sophia's development milestones and has been researching the optimal reading material for infant brain development. Alexander's influence, obviously." "Obviously," Olivia agreed with affection. Maya had taken to her role as big sister with characteristic enthusiasm, treating the responsibility with the seriousness of a scientific mission. They moved to the living room, where Rachel handed Olivia a glass of iced tea before settling onto the sofa. Through the open door to the study, they could hear Alexander on a conference call, his voice low and measured as he directed his company remotely during his paternity leave. "He's a natural," Rachel said, nodding toward the nursery. "This time around, I mean. With Maya, he had to play catch-up, but with Sophia, he's been incredible," Olivia agreed, sinking gratefully into an armchair. "I don't think he slept more than 3 consecutive hours since she was born, but I haven't heard him complain once." "Second chances," Rachel mused. "We've all gotten them in different ways, haven't we?" The observation hung between them, laden with shared history and understanding. 8 years had passed since that fateful night when Alexander and Olivia first met. 6 years since Maya had pointed to his building and set in motion the events that would eventually bring them all together as family. Alexander emerged from the study, his call finished. Though impeccably dressed as always, the shadows under his eyes betrayed the sleepless nights of new parenthood. His face brightened, seeing them both. "Maya just texted," he announced, holding up his phone. "She's finished her science camp project and wants us all to see it when I pick her up. Her exact words were, 'It's my greatest achievement to date.'" "Humble, isn't she?" Rachel laughed. "Wonder where she gets that from." "Certainly not me," Alexander replied with mock innocence, dropping a kiss on Olivia's head as he passed. "I'm known for my modesty." The easy banter between them, ex-lovers who had found their way to genuine friendship through their shared love for their daughter, still occasionally struck Olivia as remarkable. The jealousy or awkwardness that might have poisoned their unusual family had been replaced by mutual respect and affection. "I should get going," Rachel said, gathering her things. "I have a meeting with the gallery about the Chicago exhibition." "Still on for Sunday dinner?" Olivia asked. "Wouldn't miss it. Maya's been planning the menu all week." Rachel paused at the door. "She wants to make pasta from scratch. Apparently, there's a YouTube tutorial she's been studying." After Rachel left, Alexander settled beside Olivia on the sofa, his arm wrapping around her shoulders with familiar comfort. "How are you feeling today, really?" "Tired," she admitted. "Happy, overwhelmed, grateful." She leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "All of the above. I have something for you," he said after a moment, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet pouch and placed it in her palm. "I was going to wait for our anniversary, but it felt right to give it to you now." Olivia opened the pouch to find a delicate gold bracelet with 3 small charms, a butterfly, a star, and a tiny heart. "Maya helped me choose them," Alexander explained, his fingers brushing hers as he fastened the bracelet around her wrist. "The butterfly for where our story began, at Maya's birthday. The star for Sophia, despite Maya's disappointment that we didn't name her Galaxia." His smile deepened, and the heart for what brought us all together despite everything. Olivia touched each charm gently, the metal warm against her skin. "It's beautiful," she whispered, emotion tightening her throat. From the nursery came the first soft sounds of Sophia stirring from her nap. Alexander stood, pressing a kiss to Olivia's forehead. "I'll get her," he said. "You rest." As he walked away, Olivia closed her eyes, listening to the gentle murmur of his voice as he lifted their daughter, to the distant sounds of the city beyond their windows, to the quiet rhythm of her own heartbeat. The path that had led her here had been unexpected, complicated, filled with moments where everything could have unraveled. But sitting here now, the bracelet circling her wrist like a promise kept, Olivia couldn't imagine any other destination. Their unconventional beginning had led to something beautiful, a family created not from perfect circumstances, but from perfect love. Sometimes the most meaningful journeys began with a single unexpected step. The evening sun cast long shadows across the terrace of their home, where friends and family had gathered to celebrate Sophia's first birthday. Maya, now 8.5, presided over the festivities with characteristic authority, directing younger cousins and organizing games with the confidence of a natural leader. Olivia stood by the railing, watching Alexander kneel beside Sophia, as she took tentative steps toward Rachel, who encouraged her with outstretched arms. The baby's delighted giggles floated through the warm summer air, a sound that still melted Olivia's heart every time she heard it. "Penny for your thoughts," Alexander said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. Sophia had finally reached Rachel's arms in triumphant wobbles, earning applause from their gathered loved ones. "I was just thinking about paths not taken," Olivia replied, accepting the glass. "How one small change in our story could have led us somewhere completely different." Alexander followed her gaze to where Maya was now carefully helping Sophia. touch a butterfly that had landed on the flowering bush nearby. If you hadn't watched Maya that day, if she hadn't mentioned my building, if Rachel hadn't kept that photo, Olivia added, if you hadn't recognized me in your office. 1,000 crossroads, Alexander agreed. And somehow we found our way here. As twilight deepened, candles were lit around the terrace, casting a golden glow over their assembled family. Not just those related by blood, but the chosen family they had built around them. Different paths had converged to create something beautiful, something that defied conventional definitions, yet felt unquestionably right. Sometimes life's most powerful stories begin with unexpected encounters. One night, one moment, one chance. Meeting that alters the course of multiple lives forever. These are the moments that remind us that love finds its way, even through the most complicated circumstances. If you've enjoyed this journey with us, join our Soul Stories family by subscribing. Every week, we share tales of love, healing, and hope that remind us all that second chances are always possible, and that family is defined not by convention, but by love. Until next time, remember that even the most unlikely beginnings can lead to the most beautiful endings.